Hey, what is up guys? Going to be doing a deck profile on the number 103 Ragna Zero Pumpkin Princess deck that is absolutely a blast to play, and I would say it's relatively budget friendly with a few exceptions of optional cards that can make the deck technically better in the extra deck, but for the most part it's pretty budget friendly because 103 is a card that you're going to be wanting to spam, and this card is absolutely crazy. If you guys haven't seen what this deck can actually do, basically it's a stun mechanic deck where you make it so your opponent can't actually bring out anything, and on top of that you get a bunch of draw power, so the deck can be really nasty to run into. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump right into the deck profile, and then I'll explain the choices as we go along. So first off, we have our Big Daddy BLS over here, best card in game. You don't actually need to run this card, but I figured BLS is just too good not to play in any deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Next up, we have 3 star drawings. What this card allows you to do is you can normal summon this card, then special summon Kage Tokage, or if you happen to have a Mystic Tomato that floats you into another Mystic Tomato, you can go ahead and normal summon star drawing, make it in 103, and then get an additional draw power, and then activate this card's effect if you happen to be able to pop something, then draw more cards, and the advantage you get in this deck is absolutely crazy. I almost thought about playing Tragodia in this deck, but for the most part, you don't really need it. As soon as you make 1 or 2 Ragna Zeros, usually the game has already ended in that aspect. I mean, heck, you can make one of these, and when they finally get over it, bring it back, and then pop more, then draw more, and it's going to just be crazy. Your opponent's going to be super upset about how insane this card actually is, because I think this card is absolutely ridiculous. Next up, we have 3 Mystic Tomatoes. This card will float you into Pumpkin Princess. You want to get out Pumpkin Princess as quickly as possible in this deck because you want to get those counters on it. You want them to try to MST these cards, and then you're trying to activate other cards where they're like, oh man, I wish I had that MST. Or sometimes if you activate Supply Unit, a lot of players get really afraid of this card, and I don't blame them because sometimes with Supply Unit, you get 5-6 cards off of one Supply Unit, and then your opponent is just like, I gave him too much advantage, I quit. But Supply Unit is a really nasty card, so this is just basically used to actually force out MSTs, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Next up, we play 2 Prematurl. Prematurl gets you Pumpkin Princess, but the reason why I went for 3 Mystic Tomato over 3 Prematurl is because Mystic Tomato can actually get me this card, and I really like this card as well because it lets you play a little bit more aggressive if you have to. But Prematurl is still pretty good. You would just want to get out Pumpkin Princess as quickly as possible. Prematurl also lets you special summon it in face-up defense position, which is actually really nice because technically you can't set this card to actually get its effect. Just keep that in mind. That's just something that's important. If you have to normal summon it, you might take some damage, but don't worry. This deck can get really fast. As long as you can get those counters on Pumpkin Princess really early on, your opponent is just going to be in a bad spot. Next up, we have 3 Kage Tokage, and this card is just used because you know, when you normal summon something, you can go ahead and special summon it, and then you go into 103. Pretty self-explanatory. Next up, 3 Pumpkin Princesses. Pretty good. I mean, what I love with this card is it also affects XYZs. I know Burn of the Mighty doesn't stop XYZs, but the thing is, before your opponent is even able to make any of the Exceed cards, just make this and then go ahead and pop something because it's once per turn during either player's turn, which does count as a quick effect. So when they're about to make something, just be like, no, you can't make that Synchro, or you can't make that thing that they want to make. Beals can get kind of nasty. It's that card where it can't be destroyed by battle or by card effects. That's where 101 comes in and wrecks that card's day. But for the most part, if you happen to have things like Burn of the Mighty or a Pumpkin Princess, you could just sit there for a while and just stall for a while, and then eventually they won't have any options, and hopefully eventually you'll be able to make a 101, and then you can absorb that card as long as it's not in defense position, and then you can secure victory through that. But Pumpkin Princess just gets absolutely ridiculous once it gets too many counters. If you have multiple Pumpkin Princesses on board, it gets really nasty because remember, it counts each standby phase of each player. So basically, you can think of it every time it rolls back to your turn, that's 200 less attack and defense for each counter on this card. Next, I play 2 Maxi, and then I play 3 Veiler. 3 Veiler is used because you want to be able to keep this thing on board as quickly or as long as possible and as quickly as possible, because if you can get this card out and successfully get its effect off twice, you get to draw 2 cards and pop 2 cards, which means your opponent might not have anything on board, and then from there maybe you can XYZ Reborn if they happen to destroy it, and then when they go for their actual play later on, you can just go for this effect again and then pop and draw. What I really love with this card is, if your opponent happens to Dark Hall and you have a XYZ Reborn, you can just go ahead and just bring it back immediately and then still disrupt their plays and then still draw extra cards, which it becomes crazy. Next up, I play 2 Duality. There are a lot of times in this deck where you will be trying to get this card out first turn. Like I said, it's most important to get out this card as quickly as possible. You want to get those counters out on board. So getting this card with Duality, or just setting a Mystic Tomato to get this later on, or a Pyramid Turtle to get it later on, is kind of what you want to do. And sometimes if you already have a 103 on board, there's no need to actually play more aggressive. You don't want to run into a Torrential Tribute or something like that, so you can just sit with your 103 on board and then just keep on popping stuff and getting additional draw. Next up, 2 MST and 2 Forbidden Lance. These are just used to keep 103 alive as much as possible and successfully get the summons out as much as you can. Next up, I play 3 Supply Unit. This card is really good in the deck when you play certain decks that love floater cards, like for example Mystic Tomato and Pyramid Turtle. And one thing to keep in mind, it actually does not work with Pumpkin Princess, because instead of, what does it say? Yeah, what is this? If this face-up card is destroyed while in a monster card zone, you can place it face-up in your spell and trap zone as a continuous spell card instead of sending it to the graveyard. So I believe that, I don't think that's a glitch, because it says if it is destroyed, you can place it instead of sending it to the graveyard. I thought that that would count as being destroyed, but it might just be an error on this, because this technically says it does not have to actually hit the graveyard, so who knows. But anyways, yeah, it's just as a heads up, it doesn't work like that. But this card is basically used to bait out MSTs. I mean, if it stays on board, it's still plus. And then I have 3 Shard of Greed. This is also a card that's used to bait out MSTs, because if your opponent MSTs this one, has too many counters, it becomes unfortunate. So many decks, I would say right now, are just doing like double MST. A lot of players, personally the ones that I've seen that are like, you know, high ranked on Dueling Network and DevPro, they've been cutting MSTs because of artifacts. Artifacts can get really nasty. If you MST, they'll just plus off of you, so you know it becomes a real problem. And also, wiretap is getting more and more popular. So for the most part, I think 2 MSTs is sufficient for most players. And if they MST, you know, one of your Shard of Greeds or one of your Supply Unit, you know, later on when Pumpkin Princess comes out, they'll be like, oh shoot, maybe I should have saved that MST, because you're going to be able to get so much free extra advantage off of this card. The next up, we're playing 3 Bird of the Mighty. This is also a card that they're going to wish they saved that MST for, because they won't be able to summon anything. They're just going to have to set cards and hope that they survive. And if they summon anything, don't worry, just pop it and draw an additional card, so it becomes really advantageous for you. Next up, 3 XYZ Reborns, just because this deck can throw out 103 relatively fast. I mean, a floater into any... You float into one card, then your normal summon, and bam, you'll have it. And if you happen to get it stopped, hey, don't worry about that, because hopefully you can make it maybe next turn or something like that. And besides, you hopefully can lower their attacks with this, and also Burn of the Mighty. And lastly, we have 2 Black Horn of Heaven. This will stop things like Black Rose Dragon and the Evil Storm Exciton Knight, because basically this deck will succeed at basically playing any slower deck. A fast deck that can blow up the field, say for example like Judgment Dragon, those are things that will actually wreck this deck, because you know, obviously they will blow up everything, so that means all the Shard of Greed, that means all the supply units, that means all the Burden of the Mighties that you have on board. You're going to lose a lot of stuff, but hopefully you'll happen to have Effect Veiler for that, you'll happen to have a Black Horn of Heaven for that, but more than likely, if you already have a 103 on board, don't worry about Judgment Dragon, or don't worry about things that like Exciton Knight or Black Rose Dragon, because if you realize your opponent can make a thing like Black Rose Dragon, go ahead and activate this effect. Once they go normal summon monster, special summon something else, hey, you can activate this card's effect and get rid of that monster, so you can prevent them from even bringing out that thing that would actually wreck your entire field. So keep that in mind. That's very important to think about, because if you lose this card, yeah. Well, if you lose your board, I would say in this deck, you can just lose the game. So keep in mind, just remember that this is a quick effect, so you can use it during your opponent's turn as well. And priority doesn't exist, so therefore this card is actually much better. As far as the extra goes, the most important thing is triple 103. Majority of the time I will just use this, and if I can get this card out like once or even twice, usually your opponent will just end up quitting, because so many decks, they rely on going for XYZs, and if you just go, oh, nope, you can't make the XYZ, and then they can't have anything, they don't have any rebuttal play, you'll just instantly win because of that. So this card is fantastic for that. I decided to throw in 2 Crazy Box just because I really love this card, just for the sake of halving my own life points half the time. Because I swear on DevPro, every time I do this, half the time I half my own life points. But this card is just there for that sacky aspect that is just really fun in the game, for me at least. Next up, we have Photon Butterfly over here. Basically, it's a light target for BLS. I mean, for the most part, I would say Black Triple Corn is usually the better card to go to. Then there's also Double 101. Like I said, I know this is kind of, it was meant to be originally a budget deck, but if you are playing online, hey, why not throw in, you know, 101s? Because this card, it deals with beals, and it deals with things that you just normally can't destroy with 103. You can always have this as an option just to absorb it. Diamond Direwolf is fantastic, and it also does work with supply units, so hey, pluses for you. Next up, I have the Exciton Knight. One's good. You could technically play Roach in here, but for the most part, when I was looking at this, I was like, well, why would I want to go for Roach when I can, you know, use this and basically get rid of anything and draw a card? So, and Roach can't stop, you know, things that are non-inherent. So things like Judgment Dragon, yeah, you can stop those, but things like Megalo or anything that basically the Thunder King can't stop, the Roach can't stop as well. So Roach can only stop things that Thunder King can stop, and this gets rid of anything, and you get to draw the card. So I went ahead and dropped Roach for that. I have my Stroke, and then Daigusto Emerald's not too bad in this deck. I feel like this card's okay. A lot of times, I mean, you'll be going for this, but if you want to, you can go for this just to get extra draw power. Then Dweller, just because it's a relatively good card. And then we have Gaga Kawaii to burn your opponent for injury. And then lastly, I thought this was kind of important to mention, because the only things that would really hurt you in this deck, I would say, are decks that can blow up the field multiple times. That's really what's going to hurt you. Things like Judgment Dragon, or things that can make like Black Rose Dragon. Originally, I was playing Starlight Road, and it's not bad. I mean, you can use your own judgment for that, but this can stop other things. This basically stops all XYZs and all Synchros. But Starlight Road, I really like it, kind of, because not only do you get a Stardust Dragon, but that makes it so they can't pop your other stuff, so you can keep Stardust, alive, because Stardust has, relatively low attack, I would say. Well, 2500 is okay against certain decks, but basically, your Stardust will be relatively strong in one aspect because you'll be lowering their attack with Burn of Mighty and Pumpkin Princesses, so they won't be able to run off that Stardust Dragon. If they're going to try to pop it with, Black Rose, you just stop it. So I really like Stardust Dragon, but there are things like Trap Stun that, can stop Starlight Road, whereas Wiretap is pretty much the only card that I would say that a lot of meta players are playing and that would actually stop stuff. Seven Tools has basically disappeared in this game. It's pretty much just all about the Wiretap because it gets the job done and you can keep yourself from taking that additional 1,000 life points. But anyways, this has been the deck profile for the number 103 Ragnas Zero. If you guys want to actually download the deck, or if you want to learn how to download decks, I'll put a link down below in the description box. But anyways, have fun with this deck, guys. If you have any suggestions for improvements, I would love to hear them, because I like seeing random innovative decks, and this one was a lot of fun to actually build. Originally, I wasn't playing Burn of the Mighty because I was like, well, it doesn't stop XYZs, but then I realized you could just pop the thing before XYZs come out. So that's the best tip I can give you for this deck, is just make sure before your opponent is able to make anything that would technically hurt you, go ahead and pop it with this effect, and then you'll be at more at an advantageous position. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Azneyes signing out.